Hello there, I'm Francesco Farabi and this is my first video on this channel, on Kimera channel. So welcome into another tutorial video by Kimera Models. This is the first time that I make something like that. I used to make video in the past, but normally there is someone that filmed me, so it's very different for me to start these things completely alone. So probably there will be something that I have to fix in the future, but okay, this is just a first approach and we'll see what's happened. What I will present you today is a video tutorial on the painting of my Space Marine. I painted a full cover by freehand Space Marine. It's something that I did several times in the past. It's, I think, connected a bit on my style. I think I am quite recognizable for these kind of things. And I think that could be good to use this figure to show you some trick on how I made this kind of freehand on a figure, on a tiny figure. So the thing is to use a Space Marine or a tiny miniatures as a little canvas to tell a kind of story. One of the topic of this figure was not only just painting freehand, and I will show you how, so my technique on doing that, but it's also connected with the idea that I have to paint a completely figure in black and white. That's will be not completely black and white, I will explain you, but it's a gray, no, a grisaille kind of figure. This is interesting because you don't have colors, so you use only value to tell the story and to paint. So it's all about atmosphere made by value, difference of contrast. So we will talking about contrast, value, and obviously freehand. I hope you enjoy, and well, press like, subscribe to follow us for new tutorial in the future. Ciao. So guys, first of all, how to achieve the black and white. Normally you'd think that could be easy to do just with white and black, but I prefer to put a kind of slightly color in the gray. I prefer not a very direct gray. This is also because normally the gray made with the pigments looks a little bit bluish. This is because there is basically no pigments, no black pigments that are really black, but they are like a kind of very dark bluish gray. So for that reason I prefer a gray that is more warm. How to achieve that? You can use several colors. This is how I did it with Kimera Kolors. So I used the black, I used this fantastic khaki that is in the set by Fabrizio Russo, but you can use whatever khaki you want, and a white that is not exactly a pure white. I can also add the pure white later, and normally I do that, but it's basically like a white because in this color there is approximately 95% of white or something like that, and some kind of yellow. I show you the mixing very quickly. So black, khaki, and our white. That's it. Very easy. So basically everything that you will see in this video will be made in this way. I will start with a base that is not a completely pure black. You will see I prepared the figure with the airbrush, but just a very quick pre-lighting from black to a very dark gray, so nothing very extreme, okay? So I have the black, I create my gray, so basically this will be my gradient. I add a time more khaki, and then I start to add the white. Until the pure white. So, as you can see, all the things that you will see are made in this way. So one of the interesting things is that looking like this, you see this color very brownish now because it is in a very white plate. But on the figure, this will look very gray. It's just something that will define the white balance of the figure. We were talking about that. So enjoy. Okay, here we are. Obviously the video is made with a speed up. This is because it's a long process and we have to stretch it in a video that is not more long than 1 hour for 2 episodes. So 1 hour and 1 hour, 2 hours totally for a painting that is, I think, the 4 times more long. Maybe also more because I didn't film everything of the figure, but also because even for you, at the end, some of the things are the same kind of approach. Anyway, some things just before start. I have to excuse me to say you sorry for my English that is not perfect. So I hope you enjoy and you understand me well, even if my English is not perfect. So I start. What is my philosophy behind the making freehand on figure? As you will see and you start see, what I'm doing now is starting with a quite black background. Okay, the figure is not pure black, as you see, it looks like quite black, but it's basically prepared with a base of black in airbrush and some adding gray sprayed in a zenithal way. Okay, so it's just a little difference between the black and the gray, and before I start to paint, I just make a kind of wash of black, a very diluted black, to have more contrast between the shadows and the highlights. But basically it's prepared very, very, very dark, as you can see. So what is the point to start with black and I mean dark kind of environment, dark kind of base? This is because I think that it's much more easy to paint freehand, to design on figure, to make draw on figure, starting from the shadows and go to the highlights. This is because, as you see now, I am not drawing lines, I'm drawing shapes. Look, for example, now I'm doing a school, okay? So I am not sure that at the first line that I made, everything is perfect. So I start to create the occupation of the space. You start to create something that looks like a kind of school, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's just, in this moment, it's just fixing the occupation of the space. Start think about what is the kind of decoration that I want to make, you know? For example, in this case, what was the point of the figure? I'm not very worried about the background of this type of Space Marine in itself, okay? For me, it's just science fiction gothic miniature that I want to paint in a way that looks interesting. So normally I take some inspiration from the background of Games Workshop. So for example, in this case, there are inspiration from, I don't know, Black Templar or other things like that, but it's not very important to me, okay? But you can obviously apply the same kind of rules, even stay inside the pure idea of Warhammer background, okay? So Warhammer lore, okay? But in this case, what is the point? I want school as a main kind of decoration, because he has also a school mask, so I think it works. He is very dark and all looks like something very dark. So schools and mechanical things. That for that reason I imagine to use this kind of circular mechanism, okay, as a decoration, and other than this, also some kind of, you know, Gothic, Baroque decoration that are applied just to add more richness, more, you know, to define better the main shapes, etc., etc. So, going on, you see, for example, that now the school start to coming out, no? You see, now looks a little bit more like a skull. Now the shapes is more defined, how I do it, it's adding even more pale color, no? I start to, basically, in this moment, I start to paint like if I have a sculpt under my brush, you see? So I make my brush strokes in a way that is very quick, just to define, to sketch everything. If I make a mistake, I can erase very quickly. This is important. I use black and white also when I made freehand in color. Maybe I can explain you this in another tutorial in the future. But this is the preparation of all my freehand. I always paint everything in this kind of grisale color. This is because it's very easy, basically. So in that way, you have a black, a gray, and a white. If you make a mistake, you take the black and you just erase it. You will see a lot of time these things during this video. You will see that sometimes I just make a stroke, but the stroke is not perfect to me, so I coming back with the color more dark, like black, and I refine and refine and refine. And starting from something very sketchy, it becomes much more precise every time I go up with the highlights, okay? So while I'm continuing to paint the skull, as you see now, the skull looks better. Let's talk a little bit about how is made this tabard, okay? First of all, I start with the tabard. Why? Well, first of all, this tabard, it's in the center of the figure. So it's one of the first, probably is the first freehand that everyone will see in the figure, because it's in the middle, is in the front, okay? And the other part of the armor, so in the front, is made in a way that you can't put really freehand. You can put freehand on the legs, but you can't put freehand, for example, on the chest, because it's like a kind of skeleton chest. So it's not okay to doing a freehand, okay? So this will be the first freehand the people see when you finish the figure. So it's very important that this is very effective. So I start with that, also because this will set the mood of all the other freehand that I will make, okay? It's like, you know, like if it's the beginning, okay? This is the abstract of the full figure, okay? It's the summary of the full figure. All the other things will be a reinterpretation, re-elaboration of this main idea. Okay, so we have a skull with a cape. That basically it's him. So in my imagination, the idea is like if he is, obviously he is not putting his portrait on his tabard, but the idea is that he wearing this kind of dress, not the cape and the skull face, because it's related in some way on his religion, on his philosophy. So he is dressing in a way that is related to his God or something like that, okay? So this is the representation of the kind of God, okay, that he is trying to look in like, okay? So it's not him, he is the God, okay? I don't know, God is not the proper word, but the important is that you get the point, okay? So then we have basically a demonstration of how I create you know, a proper occupation of the space, no? Here there is a question of composition. How I composed this figure? Look, I have a central figure that is the skull with the cape. Then I have two secondary things, okay, that are this mechanical wheel, okay? Then I have a border. Border is something very important in my style when I made freehand. I never loved freehands that floating on a banner or floating on a shield. Okay, I have to be clear. There are a lot of examples in the story of banner in the history, I mean in real history, like in medieval time or something like that. There are a lot of examples of banner that are absolutely not made with the border, okay, or shield without border. But most of the time this board, in particular on the flag, on banner, there is, and sometimes even in the dress. But what is the point, okay? In this case, I am not copying something for an historical issues, okay, for an historical representation. I am creating something that is basically new, okay? It's original. So what the board, the frame make to me is exactly that, is framing the figure. Imagine the same design that I made here, that I'm doing here now for you. Imagine this without this frame. It looks like if this a school floating somewhere. So one of the things that I love to do for all this here, I made this kind of figure, is to create a kind of connection between the main figure and the frame. Look, for example, in this case, I create this idea of okay, is a kind of caped space marine school figure, okay? Look how the cape continue to the hand of the tabard and create the frame. The frame start from the design. Is not a realistic design, it's an iconic kind of design. So this is what I always try to do in figure. I prefer this kind of style. You have not to do necessarily that. This is my style. You can use the same technique that I show you here to create something completely different. Okay, this is just my way on doing this kind of things. So as you see, now all this space is occupied in the proper way. So basically you are looking at something that looks like finished, okay? Looks like if all the design is did, okay, is done. Some other things important, for example, in the lower part you see this circle, okay, this kind of ellipsoid, egg, okay, circle, that is basically the frame of a gem, a gemstone. I put a lot of gemstone in my freehands. I think it's like it's some of my kinks when I paint freehand is to add gemstone and planets. I love planets. I love put planets on the background of my design. I really love that because I think that they works as a light, a point of light. You can work on the effect of the background. I always loved images with the moon on the background, so I love planets, okay? And I love gemstone. This is because gemstones are very beautiful to see, very eye-catching, and they helps a lot to create a point of interest. So this gem on the lower part stands out the figure, okay? This is just something that you can use or not. This is something that coming from my experience. In my experience, gemstone looks good on figure, works. Obviously, this is something very important I want to say you. The story comes always first. What I want to say with that, I'm always, when I'm teaching, I always say to my students that first of all comes the concept. What is the concept? Is your idea on the figure. So the concept rule all the rest that you do. So you can put whatever you want on the figure, but has to be coherent with the story that you want to tell. And your story is tell not only with colors and with, for example, in this case freehand, but it's tell it also with the style you choose. More cartoonish, more realistic, more, I don't know, something in the middle, looking like, I don't know, for example, in this case, black and white. So there are different kind of interpretation and styles, and these styles helps you to tell different stories. So first of all comes the story. You can add gemstone wherever you want, yes, but there will be probably kind of figure where a gemstone is not very good. For example, if you do a old banner from I don't know, a zombie army, maybe a gemstone on the banner, I'm not sure that works. Or for example, over a banner or a shield of a kind of human beast, you know, beastman army, I don't think a gemstone work. Whatever you can do, whatever you want, but it has to be coherent, okay? There are not really rules, written rules. It's a question of to be coherent with your vision and the figure you are painting, okay? Okay, sorry for this digression. Let's go on. As you can see, now I'm having every time more white. So the idea is that the freehand starts to look every time more defined. You feel like it's finished, but it's not finished. You see that every time that I had more white, probably you think, oh, okay, now it looks finished. That is the point. You have to arrive until the pure white, okay? Not real pure white. We are not using a pure white in this case, but it's the white you defined for the figure, because every time you paint, you balance your white. So you decide what is the white, which one is the white of your figure. Okay, so in this case, I am working with my white. That is not the final one. You will see that in some minutes I will start probably to add the very last point of light. I also retouch the black, because if you remember at the beginning I said you that the base was not really black, was a kind of very dark gray. Why? Because I need, as you can see now, I need to have the opportunity to add not only more light, but even a little bit of more deepness on the shadows to make the contrast always stand up. Okay, sorry if sometimes the figure comes out from the frame. As I tell you, it's the first time that I painted over a camera, so it was not easy at the beginning to frame in the figure in the proper way. Anyway, about some technique that I'm using here. As you see, for example, I'm basically doing a metal no metal here. So this is a metal frame for a gemstone, or for example, the two mechanical wheels looks like metal kind of thing. So you see, I make some kind of reflection, and the idea that looks like a metallic things. Looks how I continue to make the tiny line that I created stands up. Something that is very important, and you will see in the second part of the video, is that sometimes you make a frame that, or a design that doesn't work very well. In this case, you have to erase it. You will see it because this happened during this painting, so I can show you. Now, here I'm doing the gem. So, how to do a gem? Basically, this is like the same kind of technique that was made, I think, the first time by Make maybe in the late 80s or 90, I don't remember, for warhammer figure. So it's something very, very quick. You can make them much more complex. I use sometimes to do this in a very more complex way, but in this case it's very little, very effective, has to be painted very quickly, and that's it. Basically, when you paint a gemstone, it's like if you make a kind of round, because in this case it's a round gem, okay, a round metal no metal inverted. You have to invert the light and put the shadows on the side where the light comes from. Put the highlights in the opposite part, respect on the lights, and then you put a very strong point of light, a point of reflection, one or two. In this case, I put two, one or two strong, pure white point of reflection in the black. This gives the sensation of a gemstone. Okay. Okay, as you see, here is the white. You see that before looking like I put the pure white, but now it's more white. So every time looks more deep, more powerful, as you see. Look at that. Okay, this is some texturing. Probably you see that, but my freehand during the years developing in a different way changed a lot. And one of the things that I like to create a kind of always the sensation that there is a texture under the drawing. It's not a drawing made over a super polished surface, but it's like a surface that has a kind of texture. Okay, even if it's metal, or in particular if it's a dress, okay, it's a cloth. This is to me very important to give more power and expressivity on on the figure, okay, on the general effect of the surface, okay. But it's also because I love brushstrokes, in particular in the freehand. In the past, when I started to do figure like this, in particular, for example, when I won my first two Slayer sword in 2006 and 2007, my two figure that gives me the Slayer was two figure covered by freehand. In particular, the second, that was the first covered of freehand Space Marine I've ever made. As you can see, because I put it now on the screen. These two figures was made with a technique that was similar to that. It was the beginning of this kind of technique, but all the drawing, all the design were very smoothed. I wanted to achieve something very, very silky, very, I want to erase in some way my brush strokes, everything super smooth, super like this, okay? But during the developing of my style, I started to prefer some kind of more powerful interpretation, something more expressive, okay? So I love how different brushstrokes gives to the design, to the draw, a different plane of deepness. So it's not like if you have something in the front, okay, so the most illuminated part in the front, and this degraded very smoothly on the shadows, but it's more like you have a lights, then a powerful shadows, then another powerful lights, and something in the middle, and this create to me a very interesting effect in the wall figure. When you have the wall figure close to you, looks like it's more full of information, okay? The surface is full of more information. Okay, while I'm talking about other things, I am finished, you see, the tabard, and I am moving into the leg. What is the difference when you approach this kind of style on something that is not flat? Okay, first of all, basically the leg of a Space Marine is flat, so the technique is not different, so as you can see. Here, what is very important is to decide if you want to make a draw that is something figurative, so like a figure, like a character or a face or a skull or something like that, or I don't know, an images that is something defined, or just use the idea to create a kind of pattern that is a decoration, okay? In this case, I choose for a decorative kind of freehand. So the idea is that I create the sensation, the illusion that the legs is not properly, smooth, but there is something that is carved on it. So the idea is the tabard is drawn, the armor is carved. This is the difference. So I have to illude, to make an illusion, no? It's like a nice illusion, okay, that this smooth surface is not smooth, but is carved. So I will apply the same rule that I applied in the tabard, but working with the single shapes of the design in a way that looks bold, okay, as you will see here. As you can see, I just start define all the things. Here obviously I had a skull, because as we say the skull is the main things, okay? It's like the main figure of this part, because in the rest of the figure I also had some other elements, but skull is very important in this figure. So I sketched the very little skull. This is quite little, as you can see, so it starts to be a little bit more difficult, even because I start to be a little bit more old, so probably I think that I have to start to using some kind of lens because until now I always painted with just my eyes, but I think that after 40 years old probably I have to use that. There is nothing wrong to use lens. My only problem with lens is that they don't give me the sensation of the full figure, but there are a lot of kind of glasses that helps you to have have this option, okay, to magnifier, but I don't know how to say it in English, but I think you get the point. Anyway, okay, as you see, like for the tabard, I create the main shape of all the part. So I blocked the part. I am painting the leg in this moment, so I just work on the leg. As you see, I use same kind of elements than the tabard. There is the skull, there is the super little gemstone that I'm doing now, and there are decorations that are made with the same kind of shapes that I used in the other part. So this kind of triangle, okay, you see, triangle diamond kind of decoration, okay, with kind of knots, as you see, that are a repetition of what there is in the other part, in the tabard. You see, in the tabard there is the same kind of design. I didn't have here the mechanical wheel, but the upper part of the leg, you know, the knee protection, has a kind of crown that becomes a kind of crown of the skull, as you see, that in some way they make a kind of, they are close to the mechanical wheel sensation. They make the same sensation, okay, even if they are pointed, okay, but it's the same kind of things. It's another wheel with mechanical stuff on it, okay. So exactly how I made in the tabard, now I start to add the lights. Something important now, I hope that this start to be clear now. As you see, what I'm doing with this preparation of the figure, this preparation is sketching all the forms, the shapes. Then I try to make the shapes as perfect as possible. Then when I think that the general effect is proper, then I start to paint them exactly like if they were sculpted. So in this moment, I am painting my sketch of the skull that stay under, okay, like if it's a sculpted skull. In the same way, adding lights, you see, and build up the lights. I think it's quite clear now, as you see. Okay. Then I add some more brush strokes here and here. The little skull starts to look a little bit more like a skull. This is like a repetition of the same kind of design that I made in the other skull, you know, like if I had a kind of tubular mechanical things. And here, as you can see, I just had the lights. So probably one of the questions that you can ask me, one of the things you can ask me is, but this pattern that you are using, it's something that you prepared in a paper or something like that? No, I created this directly on the figure. It's basically something that comes out from my mind. I did it for a lot of time in my life, so probably I have a kind of vocabulary of shapes that I can use. But for you, my suggestion is to copy. Take reference. So you can use reference from the world of miniature, so other painters that paint decoration, and try to add your shapes vocabulary. This is something I think very important. It's like when you learn how to, for example, to play an instrument, a musical instrument, or you learn how to talk in another language, to try to have your vocabulary every time more interesting and full of information and new words, okay? This helps you to create different things. I want to stop one moment these things that I'm saying to you, because probably you see that happened something. I was not convinced of what I made before. you see, there was something that for me does not works in the moment that I paint that. So I changed the shapes, as you see, and for example, I erased the hole for the gemstone, because probably here is too little, this space to make a good gemstone. So I prefer to just reproduce the shape of where there will be a gemstone, so the circle, okay, the circular things, the X kind of things, but left it like a kind of full shape that helps to collect the lights of the point of the knee, because if I put a gem over there, you have like a point of more black in real part, because it's more dark, okay? Like this, if you have something more white, that helps to have a point of poor lights in the last part of the knee. And I also erased the design around the skull that looks like a kind of tubular things, because I think that works better, probably just a little texture on it.
Hey, do you want to know what paints we use in our miniature painting? Kimera Kolors is the answer. They are single pigment, supersaturated and matte acrylics. When mixed, they give pure vibrant results without any unwanted grey tones, and because it's easier to desaturate than to saturate, you have complete control over your color choices. Upgrade to Kimera Kolors for your next work and see the difference for yourself. Link in the description.
Okay, we are back after the advertisement break with the voice of my friend Riccardo Agostini, and we are here again. So with my voice and with my bad English. So listen to my bad English. I will destroy you after this hour with my fantastic English. Anyway, as you see, I start again to add the lights. I want that you notice something. Probably you noticed that, but now it's more clear. With the first shot, when I shot for you the Tabard, the gray that I used looks more like a flat gray. Now you see very strongly the presence of the yellowish khaki on the design. This is because the first shot that I made was not completely proper in terms of white balance. As I explained you, it's my first video shot make alone, so there were some problems in particular in the first part. But now you can see that. So probably you can ask yourself, well, but now it's much more yellow than the Tabard. Looks completely different than the Tabard. Yes, this is because there is not the white. So when I will add the white, you will see that they will match very quickly, okay, and they became quite similar. It's not important that they are completely the same. You can change a little bit the variation of the colors, even in a black and white. That is, I think, interesting. So we are talking also about black and white in this figure, because this figure is in black and white. So is everything just about create value, contrast difference between light and shadow. But because I don't use now a poor black and white, but it's a black and white with a kind of warm khaki in the middle. Okay, so there is a yellowish things in the middle, inside the mix. This gives me the opportunity to create some slightly variation that gives movement to the figure, makes the figure less monotone. It's monotone. It's clear that it is because it's a black and white, but creates some shades. Okay, some variation. Anyway. Going on, I start to add, as always, more white, as you see. And probably you also start to see that it becomes more matched to the Tabard. I want just to tell you something more about what I'm talking before. No? We are talking about the vocabulary of shapes. So my suggestion is to try to have a lot of different things that you know how to do in drawing. So, for example, learn how to do a skull. When you learn how to do a skull, you can reproduce the skull every time you want a skull on the figure. Learn how to do, for example, a mechanical wheel. I don't know the proper name in English, but I think you get the point, okay? Learn how to do a kind of diamonds design. Learn how to do a gem. Learn how to, a gemstone. Learn how to do different kind of frame, for example. Frame made with curve like this, or leaves kind of shapes that are typical for the you know, dress of the late medieval time, or something like that, okay? It's very important to have a vocabulary of things that you know how to do, because when you do this kind of full of framing decoration things, much more you have shapes that you know how to reproduce, much more you can be interesting, okay, in the final result. Okay, the legs start to come out. Looks how now the frame of the knee looks like a kind of metal, non-metal things. At the end, I reproduce the idea that this part is metallic. So it's a metal that is more pale than the black part of the armor, okay? As you see, okay, now looks more like a metal. It's close to the tabard now, but because the tabard it's a cloth, the kind of shiny that has, it's less shiny, okay? So you can see the difference of the materials between the knee and the tabard. And in this case, the presence of more quantity of khaki helps, okay? Gives more the sensation of something that shine. Also because normally we are used to imagine the poor lights as something that coming from the lights of the sun. The sun is yellow. So the idea is that if it's something it's illuminated in a powerful way and reflect the sun, probably it's more yellow. So for that reason, this now it start to match with the general mood of the tabard, but looks more deep and shiny. This is because this is metal, the tabard is a cloth. That's the point, okay? I think you can see it in the shot. Another thing is that, okay, probably is not clear to understand because this video is very zoomed in a lot, but I think you see that these little things that I'm doing on the legs are very tiny, so I makes a lot of mistake. Have you seen how many times I, for example, put a line but something goes wrong and I coming back with black to correct it? Now I'm adding also more white on the tabard to match the final light, okay? This is something I do a lot of time, okay, to rematch the figure. Because, okay, this is a cloth, in the other side there is a metal, but I want that the figure is matched in terms of light and shadows, okay? So I had some last highlights also on the tabard to match the general sensation. In particular where the material should be metal, no? Looks like this is the first, the last shiny reflection on this metallic part. That it's probably, we can imagine that is made with a metallic kind of dress, no? Metallic kind of clothes. I also had some variation on the khaki in the school. This is because helps the school to stand out, okay? And create also a difference between the school and the cape. Okay, now I can go on. What I'm doing now is not freehand. Now I'm painting parts of the figure that has not the space to do a freehand. So this is basically, in my opinion, two different kind of material. There are, like in this case, a leather, okay, and metallic parts. So in this case, this is leather. The part of the upper parts of the leg is metallic, okay? So I'm working on, even in this case, I'm just working with black and white, but I have to give the sensation of something that is made in leather. So I start to sketch the lights, as you see. You can see, and I want to use a powerful texture. So, as you see, I don't do the light in a linear way, but it's like dots, dots and dots, and dots and dots and line and dots and dots and lines, and then smoothing, okay? Smoothing to erase a little bit the roughness of the little dots that I use. Something very interesting when you do this kind of little dotted, scratched surface with texture is that much more texture you had, so much more little dots you had, much more becomes interesting. So 3 dots, it's okay. 10 dots, it's better. 100 dots looks very cool, and 1000 looks super cool. That's the point. You have to continue to add. You see, I decided where the lights comes from, what kind of reflection gives to the surface, and then I add little dots and scratches. It's not regular. They are not dots that are identical one to each other. They are completely, every dots is different, but they have to follow, okay, the lights scheme of the surface. Here, okay, I'm just painting the parchment part, and I just continue in the same way in terms of color. In this video you don't see my palette, but to be sincere, this is not very important because I'm using always the same color, the same shade of color, so I don't think it's very important to know exactly what I'm picking up from the palette to get what is the point of what I'm painting. Basically, it's black, white, gray in the middle, okay? Here I'm painting the metallic parts, so in this case there is no freehand, it's just a metallic part. As you can see, I try to put very quickly light shadows and point of reflection to give the sensation of a metal. It's a very tiny part, so you have to catch the point where to put some lights, that is some parts of the edges, but not all the edges. We will talking about this fact of the edges in the future, and some sparkling where the lights comes from, okay? That is, has to be coherent with all the figure. I'm going on with the belt and different part of the belt, the leather part and the metallic part, as you can see. You see, so point of lights, same colors, and go on. Now, looks what I'm doing with the leather. In this moment, I continue to add scratches and, you know, see, texturing, dots, but it's very heavy in this moment. It's very rough. So I show you a technique that to me works very well. When you are working with something that is very full of scratches and texturing, one of the things that you can do is to continue with this texturing very heavy. I had a lot of contrast. Then I continue to put dots and dots and dots, and then you will see now I had a wash of colors that is more dark, okay, to create more smoothing, to equalize the things. Looks, for example, this is a kind of gray in the middle. This is a wash, a glaze or a wash. As you see, this what I'm doing now, this create more smoothing surface. It becomes more smooth. It erase some of the contrast. I re-had this with a wet on wet technique. In this moment I'm painting, I put a layer, okay, and then a layer of very diluted colors, and then I introduce a little bit of black inside. This, as you can see, created the effect of now is a kind of leather with a texture, but not so heavy, so powerful like before. In the meantime, I am moving into the dress, okay, on the chest of the figure. Is a very little part of dress, so the only things that I think could work is to just having a repetition of the frame of the tabard that continue on the dress, on the chest. So very easy, same frame that create the sensation of a coherence, okay, like if the dress continue, okay, from the upper parts to the tabard. Same rules, same things, very sharp brush. I'm normally a painter that use not very little brush. I prefer normally a point 1 or 0, my favorite point. 2, 1 and 0, in particular 2 and 1, are my favorite point. So in this case, for example, I'm using 1.5. But it's a very sharp 1.5. But for the freehand, for the little freehand, I use normally a more tiny brush. So, for example, this one, it's a 000, very, very sharp brush. I also have to say that I prefer long point than short. There are a lot of painters that work with short point. I prefer long one. And I think you will be probably surprised in the future about something about brushes. We will be talking about brushes in the future, I think. Okay, very easy. I'm just matching the draw of the tabard with the draw of the dress. I think you notice how when I'm putting more yellowish part, the drawing becomes very different. It looks like it's not matched, but when I adding the white, the match works. Look, now the match works. Because remember that normally when you paint, the most important things are the last highlights and the last shadows. If you match it in the proper way, the last lights and the last shadows, probably the figure looks coherent. I think you can also appreciate from this angle that the leather with the last wash looks much better now. It looks like it's a different material than the others, even if it's the same colors. That is interesting. Okay, now the chest. The chest, this is metallic, non-metallic paint in a very small surface. So, sketching. The first things when I make non-metallic sketch, I have to give immediately to take the sensation of the metal. This has to be to me very quick. So very quick, powerful contrast between quite white and black, because I want to see exactly what's happened if it looks like something metallic. No? In this case, these are basically, this chest looks like kind of tree per side, tubular metallic things, and then decorative with skull things on the center, okay, and some tubular mechanical stuff. So they are little things. You have just to suggest the idea of the metal. As you see, even now that there is not the white, looks metallic a little bit, but when you add the white, it has to be immediately the effect. That's the point. You see, they are basically cylinder. So in a cylinder, you have the light that's coming through the line of the cylinder, always. I had a little bit more power into the lights when comes through the center to make this more powerful, the effect of the light in the center of the chest. And it's not pure white, it's not pure white, as you can see. But start works, then pure white. Slowly adding the pure white. Even, for example, in this case, no, this is a skull, a kind of skeleton he has in the center. You can have two different approaches. Okay, this is an important thing to me. One approach is to be very super tiny and defined. So I want to paint this little skull and skeleton in a way that looks exactly a little skull. But normally a metallic surface with a carved skull like this doesn't give it to you, when you look at this, the immediate sensation of all the shape of the skull, because the reflection is so powerful that probably you lost some information. The main shape of lights, it's more important than the shapes of the little figure that you have on it. So this is something that I learned to apply in every kind of carved things on surface that are metallic. So it has to seem like a skeleton, but it's more important the way the main lights goes into the main shape, because it's more dominant. And the lights in a metallic surface, you can try this, you can see this on picture. Normally, when the things is very little, like in this case, I mean not little because it's little the miniature, but little even because it's a little skeleton on the center of the chest. So it's little even in the miniature. If we imagine the miniature, it's a normal size space marine man, okay? So it's a little surface. When this little surface takes a lot of lights, you catch the design, so you catch that it's a skeleton, but the lights cover much more of the information of details. So you have to give the sensation that, okay, it's a skeleton, but if I make the same work, but I define perfectly the skeleton, then doesn't looks more like a metallic stuff, but probably looks like more like a skull, a bone kind of materials. In this case, I want that looks like a metallic stuff. So less sharpness, more metallics in this case. Less sharpness on the details makes much more kind of metallic effect. Has to be sharp in terms of lights and shadows, so in terms of contrast, but not in terms of details. Okay, I don't know if this is clear, but I think you can see it, because if you catch it from the distance, the sensation is that this armor is metallic, and you say, okay, that maybe this is a skeleton on the chest. If you go close, you understand that it's a skeleton, and this is exactly what probably happened in the real sides of something like that. Okay, because the lights is very powerful on something that's shiny and it's metallic. Okay, in the meantime, I pass it through parchment part. Okay, also in this case, I have to give the sensation that this is a different material than the others. So we look probably a little bit much more close to the leather part than to the metallic part. Okay, because clothes is more similar to a leather than a metallic. But how I achieve this result? I will mix the parchment more pale, okay, in general, and also more yellowish than the leather. And also the texture, it's different. It's more not dotted but linear kind of texture, as I imagine you can see. You see that it's the same approach, but looks different than the leather part. So basically the leather is like if it's a kind of black leather or brown, dark brown leather. We don't know, because the figure is in black and white in this case, so there are no color. But the sensation is that it's a very dark leather. The parchment that is not finished in this moment, it's more yellowish and more pale in general. Okay, some detailing, some last light on the leather, just to stand up a little bit more, and then going on. As you see, my way of painting, it's the same even in a figure painted with colors, okay, it's the same. I always go back and forth on different surface. This is because for me it's very important the coherence of the figure. The figure has to be very coherent, has to work very well all together. So if I paint a surface, I am very happy about the result, but I see that doesn't match with something that stay next to, I have to change or what I'm doing now or what I did before, okay? So I have to work on different surface in different moments. Even if in this moment I am painting the parchment, then I'm coming back to other part to looks them match together. This is very important. Always try to see the figure as something that is whole, and it's very difficult in particular in this kind of work, because this work as is a work dedicated completely to freehand, okay? So it's super difficult to have something that works all together, because your eyes are very easily lost in the details. So that means in this case it's even more important to catch the most important point of lights, focal points, and match the different materials in a way that works together. Okay, adding lights. In terms of technique, at the end, it's similar to the technique of the leather, but more pale, as you can see. Well, okay. So last shiny on the metal, and as always matching with the white, the last light matched with the rest of the figure. I think it's understandable that I like a lot to mix texture on figure. To me, I think it's a part of my style. In particular with this kind of work. It's not always like this. As I tell you before, the concept comes first. So it depends what is your interpretation. In this case, I wanted something very expressive and, you know, a kind of something painted with you know, with a pencil on a paper, something very, very expressive. So I want to see the brush strokes. Some other times my interpretation is more silky and smooth. Okay, here it's like a small metallic part. I think you see that my interpretation when I painted the shapes of the Space Marine is not the normal way of painting Space Marine that you see in, for example, in heavy metal style. There is a big discussion about that. It could be something to talking about for a long time, but you know, in the past, Games Workshop developed a way on painting things that comes from the late historical way of painting figure, that it's what we can call diffuse light, okay? That is real, not proper, but just to understand. The fact is, okay, I'm painting lights, just putting lights on the edges of the figure. So what is behind, what is inside the figure is black, okay, it's dark, and what is on the edges, it's white, okay, it's in light. This is something that absolutely don't happen in the reality. There is no, it doesn't exist diffuse light that really create these kind of things. This is something very effective and quick to mix works a figure, a little figure on the table when you play, okay, to make very beautiful and good looking army. So it's a very effective technique for gaming, okay. So it's nothing bad, okay, in general, but we have to say, this is my opinion, but it's a strong opinion, that it's also something old. To be sincere, I painted like this in the past because it's the way where everyone painted. When I won my 2 Slayers War, the technique on painting light and shadows was that in fantasy. It's not completely true, because there were even painters that start to paint in a way that it's more connected to the reality, so lights coming from a direction, okay, and goes to the figure in a direction. Lights, has always a direction, even if it's very diffuse or not. And normally, to be sincere, the reality is touched by different lights that coming from different things, and the lights reflects on things, on the wall, on a lot of things. So it's very complex, okay? But just to be very quick, the idea is the lights has a direction. So this direction is in the figure has to be done. So lights don't goes on all the edges, but basically goes in the edges that stay in the side of the figure that catching the direction of the lights. So this is something important. This is not a video about accidental lights, so I don't want to talk about that, but just to explain you that this is a different way of interpreting, and it's more connected with artistic, showcase miniature than gaming miniature. There is nothing wrong on makes a figure in a gaming way. To be sincere, what looks strange to me is that in some way in the last years, I see last few years, I see a lot of modern painter that paint that try to paint in that way, okay, in that old way. There is nothing wrong if you want to make a kind of revival of a style, so you want that your figure looks like something painted in the 90s or in the first age of 2000, okay? There is nothing wrong, but to me, sincerely, it's important that you also, at least also, learn how to make the lights in the proper way, because it's the things that change. One of the things that changed the way we painted and changed the world of figure from something that is like a painting a toy to play and became something that is close to an artistic thing. It's a very long discussion, so I don't think that this is the moment. Probably we can call this little part as my rant section, like Ricardo made in the past video, but it's not really a rant. It's more starting with this my first video, some discussion about what is the painting, what is the future of the painting, what was the past, because I really respect the past. I coming from this past. I am an old 43 age man. I painted a lot of figure, and in the past was completely different. But I also believe that we have to move on and discover new technique, and in particular when the technique is correct. The fact is that when the artist invented the way of doing scientifically the perspective, no one continued to paint with wrong perspective, okay? That's not make a painter like Giotto less fantastic than it is, or Cimabue. They are fantastic, but the perspective they made was wrong. So after Piero della Francesca, no one can paint a wrong perspective and looks good, at least if it's not a style, if he don't want to paint in that style. And that go to my most important sentence. I say these things a lot of times in this video. The concept comes first. The first and most important thing is the story. What you want to tell. You want to tell something, you want to paint a figure that looks like a 90, super colorful. This is your idea. Okay, go on your idea and be coherent with this idea. So at the end, it's always a question of coherency, okay? So, this is the end of the first episode, basically just an half of the painting of this figure. I decided to split it because 2 hours of video is too long, 1 hour is still very long. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I was not too much boring. And I really hope to see you again for the next episode very soon on this channel. Ciao ciao!